Well, Doctor, thank you for joining us to talk about this. And obviously, this is on the minds of a lot of people. But most recently, we have the recall of the raw cat food due to the death of a pet cat who had eaten this and contracted the bird flu through that. And I was wondering if you could maybe just give us a basic understanding, other than what I just said there, of what happened and how something like that could happen.
Yeah, so there's a lot we're still working to learn about this case, but what we do know is this cat was seen at an emergency clinic in the Portland area. Ultimately, the cat did not survive, and so it was sent to the Oregon Veterinary Diagnostic Lab at OSU for a diagnostic necropsy to try and figure out what happened with the cat, why it was sick, why it ended up dying. In performing that necropsy, the pathologist found signs that were consistent with some sort of an infection in the brain. So they did some additional testing and found that the cat was positive for highly pathogenic avian influenza virus, the H5N1 influenza, that we've been seeing mainly affecting poultry and then in some other states also affecting dairy cattle. So in investigating the case further, after we found out that the cat was positive, we found the cat was an indoor-only cat, so didn't really have any of the traditional exposures we would normally see. But in further investigating that, we found it had been eating a raw food diet. So we collected those samples from the owner and submitted those for testing as well, and were able to match a virus found in the food to the cat and confirm that the cat had contracted the virus from a raw pet food that has since been recalled.
And when we talk about that raw pet food,
Mhm.
and for people to get a better understanding of bird flu as well, bird flu is, as you mentioned, in poultry quite a bit. Is this is one of the primary carriers of bird flu?
Yeah, so typically we see wild waterfowl. So wild ducks and geese are
Mhm.
the reservoir for this virus, so they can carry it with showing few, if any, symptoms. And then from there, we see it spill over into domestic poultry. We've had over 40 cases in backyard poultry flocks since May of 2022 when we had our first case. And then we've also had 3 commercial flocks. We've seen in other parts of the country where there's a very specific strain of this virus that has also been circulating in dairy cattle. Most notably, recently down in California, they've been having quite an outbreak. We have not had any cases in dairy cattle here in Oregon, but we've been seeing through this whole outbreak over the last couple of years, though, that this virus does spill from poultry into other species periodically as well. Mostly we've seen it with wild carnivores, usually the scavenging type carnivores, where we've seen the theory is usually they've probably consumed a duck or a goose in the wild that either died or was sick with the virus and they've contracted it. But we've seen it a number of times with cats, particularly cats on dairy farms, also from drinking raw unpasteurized milk. Recently, they've been having a number of cases similar to that in LA County in California. Most of them seem to be connected with raw milk as well. But in this case, it is that commercial raw pet food that was found to be infected. It is a turkey-based product, so we're trying to find out more where that turkey came from, how it was infected with the virus, why. All of those are answers that'll probably come in the next coming weeks. But we wanted to make sure that just because of that risk that posed, we wanted to make sure we got the information out quickly. We were able to work with the manufacturer to get it recalled voluntarily right away, and be able to at least take those protective actions now while we're working to learn more.
Do you think this is something that people should be concerned with as far as, and I know there's this one particular brand that's being recalled, as you mentioned, but just raw food in general when it comes to your pets, specifically cats?
Yeah, whether there's more cases associated with raw pet foods or a direct risk from this virus, there is always a risk of pathogens in raw pet food. Many of them do have steps they take to try and minimize that, but short of cooking foods, most of the time it's pretty hard to fully get rid of all of those pathogens, so it's always going to be a risk. There's a lot of overlapping precautions that normally are in place to try and keep it from ever this virus, especially from ever making it into a pet food. Cooking though is always that last barrier, and so when you're feeding a raw pet food where cooking has been removed from the mix, that's I think always going to be a risk.
This particular cat, obviously we found out afterward that it did have bird flu, but for somebody at home who maybe has a cat that they let outside, and cats will be cats. Sometimes they catch birds. Is that something that people should be concerned with, or should they be keeping their cats more indoors, or while this outbreak is going on?
Yeah, I think it's a potential risk. We have not seen any cases that trace back to a situation like that. I do think it's possible. It doesn't seem to have been a likely or common scenario. We have been doing surveillance in cats since this first started in dairy cattle last spring, and we haven't found any other cat cases here in Oregon. So that that makes me think it's probably a lower risk. But specifically, if if cats live near somewhere where wild waterfowl are present and are getting exposed directly to those waterfowl, it would potentially be a risk.
What are just some general things that people should do as pet owners, as cat owners specifically right now, to help mitigate any of those risks of your pet contracting bird flu?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing right now is make sure that, check your freezers. If you do feed raw pet foods, make sure you don't have this product and specifically these date codes in your freezer. If you do, dispose of it right away. Um, Beyond that, I think just keeping a close eye on your pet's health and contacting your veterinarian as soon as you can if you notice anything that seems to be wrong with your pet. Beyond that, avoiding raw foods and raw dairy products with your cats as well as yourself right now is also, I think, probably a wise precaution given everything that's going on with this virus right now.
And you mentioned just paying attention to your pet, and your pet's health. What are some things that you should look out for, maybe that would stand out and be out of the ordinary when it comes to your pet, if you're concerned that maybe they are sick?
Yeah, so I normally advise people that they probably are the best people to answer that question, right? Most pet owners know what their cat acts like on a normal day, and they know right away if something's wrong. And the sooner you can get your cat seen by a veterinarian, the sooner they can evaluate them, get testing done. This specific disease is still a fairly low risk for cats, so it's not likely that it would be associated with a mild illness. It's going to be something fairly significant. Really, most of the guidance we've been putting out has been aimed at veterinarians of what to be looking for in those severe cases where you can't find anything else. For the average pet owner, unless you're feeding this specific raw diet right now, there's probably not a lot of risk directly posed. And certainly, if you're feeding a cooked diet, a normal, kibble or something that has been heat processed, there really is no risk of this virus.
And final question, just about the virus itself. It seems like we're hearing about it more. We've seen this show up in wild birds, seemingly more. Is this something that's spreading and getting bigger, or is this kind of stabilizing where it's at right now? Is it something that we should be worrying about as far as expansion of the spread of this disease?
Yeah, it's hard to say. We're definitely hearing more about it. Part of that is connected to the ongoing outbreak in dairy cattle, which we've been doing a lot of work here in Oregon to make sure we keep it out and to make sure we're doing a lot of surveillance to find it if it ever does make it here. Beyond that, I think that part of it we're hearing more about it because we're talking more about it, which I think is good. I think that the more we talk about it, the more we are concerned about it, the more informed and prepared we can be. CDC's risk assessment is still that this virus poses a low risk to the general population, but people who have potential exposures, if you've got backyard chickens and one of your birds dies, taking those extra precautions of making sure you're wearing gloves, wear goggles, wear an N95 mask, avoid handling it if you can. If you work with dairy cattle or with poultry, if you have cats that may have some exposures, understanding those risks, understanding the precautions to take if you think that may be the case so that we can protect ourselves, protect our pets, and hopefully prevent new spillovers from happening and more chances for this virus to potentially mutate and cause a problem.
You did bring something up there that just is very pertinent, I think, because a lot of people do have pets that are poultry. It could be chickens, could be ducks, whatever. Should they make sure that if they do have a pet cat, that they are keeping them separated?
Yeah, so in poultry, especially with backyard chickens, this is a highly fatal disease, and so there's not very many cases where you have a chicken that's infected when you don't know it, right? They die very quickly from this disease. I think it's always wise to keep different species separate, just because different species have different diseases they carry normally that can cause problems in others, even without talking about influenza. If you have poultry and they die unexpectedly. That is a situation. Definitely keep those separate. That is a potential exposure if your cat gets in with with chickens that have died from it. It's also a potential exposure pathway to you. And so, making sure you're taking precautions and reporting that right away so that we can help get that testing taken care of. And if they are positive, help address the issue.
And where is it that they report those to?
So they report those to the Oregon Department of Agriculture. We have a hotline that comes to us, and we investigate every one of those reports. If there's concern and risk factors that it might be influenza, we provide free testing and free consultation and work with the owner to address that situation.
All right, well, Doctor, thank you very much for having some time to talk to us today. I really appreciate it. This is a lot of good information, I think, for everybody to understand out there, especially, you see something happening, everybody's very concerned, obviously, about their own pets, but just the spread of this and seeing more of it. Anything else that you think is important for people to know?
No, I think just the last thing I'd leave you with is that hotline phone number is 503-986-4711. If owners have concerns, or if talk to your veterinarian, but certainly feel free to report that to us and we'll work with you and your veterinarian as well.
Fantastic. Doctor, thank you very much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.